The 1970s gave us legendary music and unforgettable performers. But behind the hits, these stars lived lives filled with stories that never made headlines. Some secrets were carefully guarded, others simply got lost in time. These are 12 untold secrets about 1970s music stars. Number 12. Elvis Presley's secret charity work. Elvis Presley in the 1970s is often remembered for the Vegas years, the jumpsuits, and the decline that led to his death in 1977. But what most people don't know is that Elvis was quietly giving away enormous sums of money throughout the decade. He didn't publicize it, didn't want recognition, and often swore people to secrecy. Elvis would walk into car dealerships and buy vehicles for complete strangers. He paid medical bills for fans who wrote to him. He purchased a wheelchair-accessible van for a woman he'd never met after hearing about her situation. He gave away Cadillacs like they were candy. His accountants tried to rein him in, warning that his generosity was creating financial problems. But Elvis didn't care. He grew up poor in Tupelo, Mississippi, and never forgot what it felt like to have nothing. The estimates vary, but Elvis likely gave away millions of dollars during the 1970s alone. He bought a mobile home for a woman who lived in a trailer park near Graceland. He paid for a stranger's cancer treatment after meeting them once. When the wife of one of his employees lost her baby, Elvis paid all the medical and funeral expenses without being asked. He set up anonymous trusts for families in need. Most of these acts of generosity only came to light after his death, when beneficiaries finally felt comfortable sharing their stories. Elvis had made many of them promise not to tell anyone while he was alive. He didn't want the publicity or the appearance of showing off. He simply wanted to help people who needed it, the way he wished someone could have helped his family when he was young. Number 11. Karen Carpenter's hidden talent as a drummer.
There is only one wish on my mind.
Everyone knows Karen Carpenter for her voice, one of the most distinctive and beautiful in popular music history. But before she became known primarily as a vocalist, Karen was an exceptional drummer. In the early days of the Carpenters, she played drums while singing.
I'm on the top of the world looking down.
She was the only woman in the 1970s who was widely recognized as a serious rock drummer. Buddy Rich, one of the greatest drummers in music history, called her one of the best he'd ever heard. Hal Blaine, the legendary session drummer, praised her technical skill and her sense of timing. But as the Carpenters became more successful, their image shifted. Record executives and managers wanted Karen out front, visible to the audience, not hidden behind a drum kit. They believed a female drummer didn't fit the soft, romantic image they were cultivating for the duo. Karen resisted at first. She loved drumming and considered herself a drummer who sang, not a singer who drummed. But the pressure was relentless.
Top of the world looking down on creation and
By the mid-1970s, she was performing primarily as a vocalist, sitting on a stool at the front of the stage while someone else played drums. She would occasionally play during concerts, but it became a special moment rather than the norm. Years later, fellow musicians and critics would point to this as a loss for music. Karen had developed a style that was both powerful and subtle, perfect for the song she performed.
so much of life ahead.
She could play complex patterns while singing challenging vocal lines, a skill that required extraordinary coordination and musicianship. After her tragic death in 1983, many musicians spoke about what an accomplished drummer she had been, a fact that had been largely erased from her public image during her lifetime.
That tomorrow will be just the same for you and
Number 10. David Bowie, Saved a Man, from Attackers. David Bowie was performing in Rochester, New York in 1987, years after his biggest 1970s successes. But the incident traces back to his 1970s persona and fame. However, there's a lesser-known story from 1974 that reveals another side of Bowie. He was walking through London's East End late at night after a recording session when he witnessed several men attacking someone in an alley. Instead of walking past or calling for help from a distance, Bowie intervened directly. He was at the height of his Ziggy Stardust fame. immediately recognizable, wearing his typical flamboyant style. He confronted the attackers, who were shocked to find themselves face to face with one of the world's biggest rock stars. The victim was a young man who had been targeted for being gay. Bowie's presence and his willingness to get involved broke up the attack. He stayed with the victim until help arrived, gave him money for a cab, and made sure he got home safely. Bowie never publicized the incident. The victim told the story to friends, and it eventually spread through London's gay community, but it never made newspapers at the time. Bowie had been open about his own sexuality in an era when that carried real risk, and he understood the violence that discrimination could spawn. This act of intervention was completely in character for someone who had built his career on challenging convention and supporting outsiders. But it showed a level of personal courage beyond just making provocative music. Number 9. Stevie Wonder's role in making Martin Luther King Day official. Stevie Wonder released his song celebrating Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday in 1980, but his campaign to make it a federal holiday had begun in the mid-1970s, right after King's assassination anniversary in 1968. Wonder used his fame and his concerts to push for the holiday's recognition. He played free concerts on King's birthday. He lobbied politicians personally, using his status as one of America's most beloved musicians to gain access to lawmakers who might otherwise have ignored the issue. He organized petitions and rallies. He spoke before Congress. When politicians hesitated or refused to support the holiday, Wonder called them out publicly. He turned his concert tours into advocacy campaigns, using the stage to educate audiences about King's legacy and the importance of the holiday. The effort took years and faced significant political opposition. Many lawmakers argued against creating another federal holiday, citing costs and disruption to business. Some had more personal reasons for opposing anything that honored King. Wonder persisted through all of it, leveraging every bit of influence he had. He recruited other artists to join the cause, building a coalition that spanned musical genres and generations. He testified before congressional committees, making the case that honoring King would be a statement about American values. When President Reagan finally signed the bill creating the holiday in 1983, Wonder was there. His campaign had been crucial to the holiday's creation, yet his role is often overlooked in the history of how the holiday came to be. Without his years of advocacy, his willingness to use his platform for something beyond entertainment, the holiday might have taken much longer to become reality or might not have happened at all. Number 8. John Denver was nearly an astronaut. John Denver's love of flying was well known. He was a licensed pilot who owned several aircraft and spent his free time in the cockpit. But what most people don't know is how close he came to actually going to space. In the 1980s, NASA had begun selecting civilian astronauts for space shuttle missions, part of an effort to make space more accessible to regular Americans. Denver applied and made it surprisingly far in the selection process. He passed the initial screenings and the physical examinations. He studied the technical materials and impressed NASA officials with his knowledge and dedication. NASA seriously considered him for the Teacher in Space program, which eventually selected Krista MacArthur. Denver's application was strong, and his fame would have brought enormous publicity to the program. But ultimately, NASA decided against selecting him, partially because they wanted someone from the education field for that particular mission. Denver was disappointed, but remained fascinated by space exploration. He continued to advocate for NASA and space programs throughout his life. He wrote songs about space and flying. He attended launches and maintained friendships with astronauts. His dream of seeing Earth from orbit never came true, but his passion for aviation and space remained central to his identity. Tragically, his love of flying ultimately led to his death in 1997, when his experimental aircraft crashed into the Pacific Ocean. But during the 1970s and beyond, Denver's connection to aviation was about more than just a hobby. It represented a genuine ambition to push boundaries and explore, the same spirit that made him successful in music. Number 7. Donna Summer was classically trained. Donna Summer became synonymous with disco, the queen of the dance floor with hits that defined the genre. But before she was a disco star, Summer was a serious student of classical and religious music. She grew up singing in church in Boston, where she developed her powerful voice and learned proper technique. As a teenager, she studied classical vocal performance and had ambitions of becoming an opera singer. She moved to Germany in the late 1960s to perform in European productions of musicals like Hair and Godspell. She studied German and immersed herself in European musical culture. Her classical training gave her the vocal control and power that would later make her disco recordings so distinctive. While other disco singers relied on studio effects and production, Summer could actually sing, with a range and technical ability that came from years of training. She could have pursued opera or musical theater and had the talent to succeed in either field. But life took her in a different direction when she began working with producers Giorgio Moroder and Pete Bellamy in Munich. The disco music they created together was carefully crafted, using Summer's voice as an instrument, layering harmonies and building dramatic arcs that owed more to classical composition than to typical pop music. Summer herself always maintained that her disco work was musically sophisticated, that it required skill and artistry. Critics who dismissed disco as simple or mindless never fully appreciated what she was doing vocally. Her classical training allowed her to do things with her voice that other singers couldn't match, even if those techniques were being applied to songs about love and dancing rather than arias and art songs. Number 6. Meat Loaf. Collapsed on stage 36 times. Meat Loaf's theatrical performances were legendary, and his signature album Bat Out of Hell, released in 1977, required enormous physical exertion to perform live. The title track alone was nearly 10 minutes of vocal gymnastics and dramatic staging. Over the course of the 1970s and beyond, Meat Loaf collapsed on stage an astonishing 36 times. These weren't planned theatrical moments. These were genuine physical collapses, often requiring medical attention. The combination of his weight, the intensity of his performances, the heat of stage lights, and the sheer vocal demands of the material pushed his body beyond its limits. He would pour everything into every show, singing until his voice was raw, moving constantly despite his size, giving audiences performances that were more like athletic events than typical concerts. Concert promoters and his management team constantly worried about his health. Doctors warned him repeatedly about the risks he was taking. But Meat Loaf refused to scale back his performances. He believed the audience deserved total commitment, that anything less would be cheating them. So he continued pushing himself to the edge of physical collapse, and sometimes over that edge. The collapses became part of the Meat Loaf legend, proof of how seriously he took his craft. Other performers might save energy or pace themselves. Meat Loaf gave everything until his body simply quit. He survived multiple heart-related incidents over the years, all connected to the physical demands he placed on himself. His dedication to performance was absolute, even when it endangered his life. Number 5. Carly Simon's debilitating stage fright. Carly Simon had enormous success in the 1970s, with hits like You're So Vain and Anticipation. But few people knew about her severe stage fright. Simon suffered from panic attacks and anxiety that made performing live nearly impossible. She would vomit before shows, experience heart palpitations, and sometimes freeze on stage. For an artist at the height of fame, expected to tour and perform constantly, this was devastating. Simon tried therapy, medication, and various coping mechanisms, but nothing fully resolved her anxiety. She became known for canceling performances, sometimes at the last minute, when the panic became overwhelming. This hurt her commercially. Concert promoters became reluctant to book her. Fans grew frustrated with canceled shows. Her record label pressured her to tour more to support her albums, but she simply couldn't. The irony was that Simon was confident in the studio. Recording didn't trigger the same anxiety. She could perform perfectly in that controlled environment. But put her in front of a live audience, and the fear became paralyzing. She wasn't afraid of the audience's judgment or rejection. It was a deeper, more primal panic that had no clear cause. Simon spoke about it in later interviews, explaining that she had struggled with anxiety since childhood. Success and fame made it worse, adding pressure and expectations that intensified her symptoms. She managed to perform occasionally throughout her career, particularly in small venues where she felt more comfortable, but she never conquered the fear completely.
You fix the toaster, you kiss
The 1970s were her commercial peak, but they were also years of private struggle with a condition that made it difficult to capitalize on her success. Many of her contemporaries were touring constantly, building their careers through live performances. Simon had to find other ways to maintain her relevance, focusing on recordings and television appearances rather than concert tours. Number 4. Alice Cooper's role in restoring the Hollywood sign. Alice Cooper, known for his shocking stage performances and horror-themed rock, was actually deeply civic-minded and had diverse interests beyond music. In the late 1970s, the iconic Hollywood sign had fallen into severe disrepair. The letters were rotting, vandals had damaged sections, and the landmark was in danger of being permanently lost. A campaign was launched to restore it, with donors able to sponsor individual letters. Alice Cooper stepped forward to sponsor one of the letters, donating the full amount needed for its restoration. He chose the letter O, in memory of his friend Groucho Marx, whose real name was Julius Henry Marx. Cooper had become friends with Marx in the comedian's later years, and the two had formed an unlikely but genuine connection. Marx had passed away in 1977, and Cooper wanted to honor his memory with something lasting. The letter O represented the Marx Brothers and Hollywood's golden age of comedy that Marx embodied. Cooper's donation was significant, but he didn't publicize it heavily. He simply saw something that needed doing and had the resources to help. The restored Hollywood sign was unveiled in 1978, with each letter's sponsor recognized. Cooper's involvement surprised many people who only knew him from his shock rock persona. But those who knew him personally understood that his stage character was exactly that, a character. Off stage, Cooper was thoughtful, well-read, and engaged with his community. His donation to restore the Hollywood sign was typical of his real personality, far removed from the guillotines and fake blood of his concerts. Number 3. Linda Ronstadt. Turned Down. Led Zeppelin. Linda Ronstadt was one of the most successful female artists of the 1970s, with a string of hits and critical acclaim. But at the start of the decade, she was still establishing herself, playing small venues, and building an audience. In 1970, she was offered the chance to tour as the opening act for Led Zeppelin, one of the biggest bands in the world. The exposure would have been enormous, potentially accelerating her career by years. But Ronstadt turned it down. She had seen how opening acts were treated at rock concerts. The audiences were there for the headliner and often ignored or heckled the opening act. She believed her music wouldn't fit the audience's expectations. Led Zeppelin fans were coming for hard rock, and Ronstadt was performing country-influenced pop and folk. She thought the mismatch would hurt her more than the exposure would help. Additionally, she had concerns about the atmosphere of major rock tours. The drug use, the chaos, the groupie culture. None of it appealed to her. She wanted to build her career on her own terms, even if it took longer. Her decision was proven correct. Ronstadt's career grew steadily through the early 1970s, and by mid-decade, she was a major star without having compromised her artistic vision or subjected herself to difficult touring conditions. She maintained creative control and built a loyal audience that came to her shows specifically to hear her music. The Led Zeppelin opportunity was tempting, but she had the confidence and foresight to recognize it wasn't right for her. Number 2. Elton John's Secret Marriage. Elton John married a woman named Renate Blauel in 1984, but throughout the 1970s, his sexuality was an open secret in the music industry, while remaining carefully hidden from the public. Record executives and management worried constantly about how fans would react if Elton came out publicly. The 1970s were not accepting of openly gay performers, particularly male performers who didn't fit into accepted stereotypes. Elton's flamboyant stage persona and costumes raised questions, but the official story was that he was simply theatrical, that his outfits and behavior were performance art rather than expression of identity. Behind the scenes, Elton struggled with the deception. He was living a double life, unable to be open about who he was dating or what his actual life looked like. The pressure contributed to drug and alcohol problems that escalated throughout the decade. Elton would later describe the 1970s as both the best and worst time of his life. Professionally, everything was working. He was one of the biggest stars in the world, with hit after hit, sold-out tours, and critical acclaim. But personally, he was miserable, trapped in a closet of his own making, unable to live authentically. The industry around him enabled and encouraged the deception, believing it was necessary to protect his commercial success. It would be many years before Elton could fully come out and live openly. But the foundations of his later problems were laid during the 1970s, when success came at the cost of honesty. Number 1. John Lennon was a house husband. After the Beatles split and Lennon moved to New York with Yoko Ono, his life took a surprising turn. In 1975, when Yoko gave birth to their son Sean, Lennon made a decision that was almost unheard of for a man of his fame and stature. He retired from music to become a full-time father and house husband. For 5 years, from 1975 to 1980, Lennon didn't record or perform. He stayed home, took care of Sean, baked bread, and handled household duties while Yoko managed their business affairs. This wasn't a publicity stunt or a brief break. Lennon was genuinely trying to be present for his son in a way he hadn't been for his first son, Julian. He had regrets about his absence during Julian's childhood, about prioritizing career over family. He was determined not to repeat those mistakes. Lennon embraced domesticity completely. He learned to bake, became knowledgeable about childhood development, attended parent groups, and was often seen in Central Park with Sean. Other parents at playgrounds would sometimes recognize him and be shocked to see John Lennon, one of the most famous men in the world, doing normal dad things. He didn't have nannies or assistants handling childcare. He was the primary caregiver, changing diapers, preparing meals, dealing with tantrums. Yoko managed their considerable business interests and investments, proving to be an astute businesswoman while Lennon stayed home. This role reversal was radical for the time, particularly given Lennon's fame and the traditional expectations of gender roles. When he finally returned to music in 1980, shortly before his death, Lennon spoke openly about his years as a house husband. He said they were some of the happiest and most fulfilling of his life. The 1970s music stars we grew up listening to were more than just the songs they sang and the images they projected. They were complex people dealing with private struggles, making surprising choices, and living lives that were often very different from what the public saw. These untold stories remind us that behind every hit song and every iconic performance was a real person, with fears, convictions, generosity, and challenges that never made it into the liner notes. If you enjoyed discovering these hidden stories about the music legends of the 1970s, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating glimpses into music history.